Hello, everybody. My name is Sheila. I've been teaching AAA for the last 30 years, and I've taken thousands of students through to passing the exam. Along the way, I've also seen lots of students who stumble and do not manage to make the pass mark. So the AAA exam indeed is a challenging exam. It's a very doable exam, except that these blockers can impede your ability to score high marks. So we need to make sure that we're familiar with what these blockers are and then see how we can overcome them. And sometimes we're not even aware that these are blockers. So students, they work very hard for the exam and sometimes they fail, and it's not because of the lack of effort. Everybody works hard. Let me put it this way. In order for you to travel from point A to point B, you need a car. You need to drive a car. The car is not going to go on its own. There has to be a driver. But there also needs to be fuel in the car, your gas, and that car in a good condition. So effort is a little bit like the fuel. If you don't put in the effort, then of course your car is not going anywhere. But from talking to students who have failed the exam, they have failed not so much because they have not put in the effort. Some of them work really very hard, put in lots of hours, but somehow they cannot get the marks that they want to. And some students have actually tried this exam multiple times with the same kind of results: 45, 46, 48, 41. I mean, I've seen students who sometimes do it 5, 6 times. So what is the thing that is holding them back? And this one could be like the car. So it's not so much of the fuel. You are putting in that effort. What is that car? What does that car represent? The car represents your preparation techniques, how you prepare. And that will play a very big role on whether you're going to earn that mark in the exam or not. Of course, there is also that possibility that you don't put in enough effort. That there's also a possibility because many of our students, they are working and they only take like the final week to try and prepare for the exam. But we're leaving that effort part aside. I'm more interested in the learning techniques. Now, I'm not talking about having acronyms or anything like that, but I'm saying that the preparation technique also needs to be updated. You cannot be using the old method that might have been okay for the lower level subjects, but then when it comes to the AAA, you're still using those old methods, and somehow those old methods do not generate that amount of marks, even though you have done this paper multiple times. But using that same inappropriate or ineffective or inefficient method, so you use so much time preparing for the exam, your effort is considerable. That's like the fuel. But if you don't take care of the car and update your preparation skills, then your car is not going anywhere. Or it will only be able to go for a certain amount of time. The only problem is that in your exam, time is limited. Our car has to move from question 1 right up to question 3, the end of question 3, within that 3 hours and 15 minutes. So how do we do it? So today's webinar is about how do you prepare. We'll focus more on the car rather than the effort itself, because everybody puts in the effort. And I'm hoping that you will take away some insights on how your preparation can change going into the next exam to make sure that you increase your ability to earn the marks. So it's not a matter of putting in more effort. I mean, there's only so much effort that you can put. I mean, you look at a car, you don't have space for unlimited amount of petrol, right? But your preparation technique is what is going to get the car in tip-top shape. So the global pass rate has always been in the low 30s. And ACCA says that the marks of the majority of students will be scoring between 45 to 55. So even those students who pass are only like 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. And those who fail, the majority of them are between 45 to 49. So it's a very, very small bracket. So what I want to share with you today is your past failures do not define you. You just need to update your preparation skills, your learning skills, and how that's going to translate into more marks for you in the exam. So today's session is not about how do you answer question 1 or how do you answer question 2 or how do you answer question 3. That one is handled within the courses themselves. But what we want to do today is look at your preparation skills. Yeah, so today we're looking at the top 4 blockers, why students do not reach their full potential, and how to fix it. Because if you can fix some of these blockers, it will actually help you earn more marks and then catapult you from below the 50 mark to over the 50 marks. What are the 4 top blockers? Number 1 is insufficient momentum. Number 2, poor understanding of exam techniques. Now, here I'm not talking about the detailed exam techniques that we use. Some of you are familiar with my exam techniques for audit risk. We use Omari. I'm not going to go into that. That one is the individual lessons themselves, but poor understanding of the role of the exam techniques, and that's why your answers do not fully develop. The third one is weak knowledge and slow speed. So what we want to do today is to make you aware of the 4 blockers and to think about how we're going to fix them so that you can earn more marks in the exam. Now, the first one is insufficient momentum. Now, what do we mean by that? So we've got this hill. Now, this green hill is like your exam day. And the flag on top of the hill is where you cross 50% marks. And that's your little car down there. The brown line there represents your road. That represents your preparation time before the day of the exam. And the purpose of your preparation is so that your car can climb that hill. There are 2 elements here. The road, which represents the preparation, meaning that you need to take care of your car, the learning skills. And then the second part would be to climb that hill on the day of the exam. The flag represents the 50% mark. So many students cannot get the car to reach the flag on the day of the exam. So if the whole green hill is your question 1, 2, and 3, many of them can only reach about 2.5 questions. And that also, I hear that students are missing out some parts in question 1, some parts in question 2, and then barely doing their question 3. So if you cannot reach the flag on the day of the exam, then you're going to find that you are going to score insufficient marks. So the question now is, how do you gain that momentum? Now, let me give you a little bit of a story. We live near a highway here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and it's called the Duke Highway. And there's one part of the Duke Highway where we're going up the overpass, but the overpass has got a speed limit of 40. So that's me in my car. And as I'm approaching that overpass there, I slow my car down because the speed limit is 40. I mean, you don't want to go and break the speed limit, right? I mean, that's the law, right? So I slow my car down. But then I look in the rear mirror and I see a juggernaut coming behind me. This huge haulers coming at full speed. I imagine that the speed is maybe like 150 km. Oh my goodness, I quickly pray and say, oh God, save me, because I'm slowing down to follow the speed limit. And that overpass has got a very sharp bend. So if you go very fast, chances are you're going to ram into the railing, and which has happened so many times before. Not to me, but I've seen the scars on the road, how cars have crashed. So I don't want to do that. But I see the juggernaut behind me. And I'm thinking to myself, why don't I follow the speed limit? But then because my car is in front, they have to slow down. And because they slow down, they have trouble climbing that hill. So they might be going at 120 km or 150 km. But the reason why they increase their momentum is to climb that hill. If they don't have that kind of speed, they will not be able to. but my car is in the way, so they have to slow down. And then by the time, I very quickly reached the top of the sort of the overpass there. It's a pretty steep slope, but I can see my rear mirror. Those guys are struggling. They're probably cursing me. They need that momentum to get up the hill. And then the stupid car in front probably has got a woman driver inside. You know how people always scold the woman driver, even if it's a man who's driving. So they go fast in order to make it up the hill. So that story was just to get you to see that the momentum on the flat ground is what is going to help them get to the top of the hill in faster time compared to if there was no momentum. So because the hill represents the exam day and you only have 3 hours and 15 minutes to get the job done and cross the red flag so that you're in the pass mark zone, if you don't have momentum before the day of the exam, chances are your car will make it up the hill, but maybe only halfway up the hill, or maybe just stop short of that red flag, which would be such a shame because you've put in so much effort. But the problem is you don't have the momentum. So how do you create this momentum? We're talking about preparing for the AAA exam, okay? So how do you gain that momentum? The first thing is that you need to start as early as possible. That means your learning has got to be as early as possible. It doesn't matter when you're sitting for the exam, begin serious work now. I want you to think how your effort is going to be now. You might turn around and say, I said serious effort. How serious is serious effort? What does that mean? Just imagine if your exam was going to be next week. How hard would you be working in the week before the exam or 10 days before the exam? I want you to begin to get that momentum now itself. Now, I know the exam might be a little while away, depending on when you're sitting, but it doesn't matter. I want you to get that momentum early on in the course and not wait until 1 week before the exam or 10 days before the exam. Because if you look at this car, if they had only tried to increase your speed here at this point, it would not have been enough to climb the hill. But I can see from my rear mirror, they are ramming the pedal from very, very far away because I can see how fast they're moving. From my rear mirror, I can see initially they're so tiny, but I can see the speed at which they're moving. And before you know it, they're behind my car. So what I'm saying is that if you're going to wait for 10 days before the exam to start ramping up, you might not make it even 3/4 way up the hill. So you need to start as early as possible. Now, once you get that momentum, you can slow down. But the important thing is that you get the momentum now. It is very important early on in the course itself. So if you start late, if you start ramming, or we call it cramming, in the last few days before the exam, it might require more effort later on because you've only got this space here, just a little bit of space. So it requires you to be very intensive. And we know that when you're in a panic state, information does not assimilate so well. So if you can start early on in the course, then it will mean lesser effort later. You are going to be a little bit more calm. You're not going to be in a panic state. Number 2 is you need to have consistent study time. Carve out a study time rather than I will study as and when I have the time. If you do that, you are not going to have momentum. You know, when you see a pendulum swinging, there is that momentum. And when you have that momentum, chances are you will be able to maintain your progress rather than a stop and go thing. So coming back to our picture here, can you imagine if that huge juggernaut here, of course I've got a small car, but if that huge juggernaut was going to go fast and then stop in the middle of the road and then go fast and stop in the middle of the road, they're not going to be able to climb up the hill. So I'm saying that that consistent study, it doesn't matter how long more the exam is going to be, but always think the exam is going to be next week, and that will get you into a focused mode. And make sure that you carve out a consistent study time every day. So you might only be able to afford 2 hours a day or 1.5 hours a day, but whatever it is consistent. So it is like if you are planning on developing muscles, maybe you should carry weights 30 minutes a day. So 30 minutes a day multiplied by 7 days, that will be equal to like 210 minutes. At the end of that week, you're probably going to develop some muscles compared to if you go to the gym on that Saturday and then start working out 210 minutes at the end, you're just going to get sore muscles. You're not going to be able to bulk up that way. So it takes time. Study muscles take time, but there has to be a consistent study time and not just when you get your study leave approved. And that will help you gain that momentum and that confidence. Number 3, you need to list your objectives for your study time, meaning that when you sit down to study, you need to get a little notebook and put down what your objectives are. Like, for example, maybe you're working on audit procedures. So your objectives can be 2 kinds. Let me explain. One kind of objective is to look at the marks that you're going to get, to decide that, okay, today I'm doing an audit procedure question. I need to get at least 3 out of 5 marks or 4 out of 5 marks. Put down your objective there. So that could be one kind of objective. Another kind of objective is to look at the time. That means I'm going to do this. I'm going to complete. I'm going to get all the 5 points or something like that within that certain amount of time. So there are 2 different kinds of objectives. One is to work on the quality of your answer. The other one is to work on your speed of the answer. There are 2 different objectives. So I find that a lot of students, when they're preparing for the exam, they are working on the marks part and they totally forget the time, which means that on the day of the exam, their car is struggling to go up that hill. There's just no momentum there. You cannot not practice speed and expect on the day of the exam to be working fast. It doesn't make sense. So if your exam was 9 hours, everybody will pass. There's no reason for anybody to fail. But the problem is that there's a time limit. So list your objectives for that day. Today, Wednesday, my objective is to handle audit procedures for share-based payment expense, investment property, put it down and target the kind of marks that you want. Then another time, on another day, you can target the time. Or maybe you can do it together. Then you can see your rate of output. We're talking about gaining momentum so that we can reach that red flag on the day of the exam. So if you do it this way, then at least you'll be able to monitor your output. A lot of students are quite happy that they get the marks 5/5 for audit procedure, 6/6 for audit procedure, but they don't realize how much time they've taken. So work on both. Yeah. And if you cannot hit the marks, and if you cannot hit that time, just stop and think why. A lot of students do not go on to the why. Why am I getting 2/6 for audit procedures? Why is it I can get 5/5 for the audit procedures, but it's taking me 2 hours to come up with 6 points? Why? Today's session is not so much on the technical aspects. It is about not so much on the effort that you're going to put in, because that one, everybody has got that same amount of effort that they're putting in, the same amount of energy. I just want you to think about your learning skills, your preparation skills that need to be updated so that you are more efficient and more effective in the exam so that you can reach the red flag within the stipulated time. Or maybe you can go through that whole hill in that 3 hours, 15 minutes. If you're just going to reach that red flag, there's going to be a bit of a problem, because there's always a chance that you could fail at 49 or pass at 50. We don't want that. We don't want that kind of a risk. All right. Another way that you could gain momentum is that you need to understand the big picture in AAA, how all the elements fit together, how everything connects together, how ISO 200 connects with the whole of the audit. Yeah, how does ISO 200 connect with the questions that come out in the exam for the AAA? When you try and understand the big picture, this is where a higher order of learning comes in, because you can begin to see the connections. Why is it that you need to understand letter of representation? Why is it you need to understand what is the significant risk? How your question 1 can connect with your question 2, and how it can connect with your question 3. The reason why we need to understand the big picture is because if you can understand how the different elements connect together, you know, we've got 34 auditing standards, we've got 2 quality standards, and how they all tie in together, then you're more likely to see the relevance. When you see the relevance, you're more likely to remember, you're more likely to understand, and therefore you're more likely to be able to apply it in the exam. It's not just going to be some blind set of points that you are going to memorize. Forced memorization, well, at least you can remember the points. Well, that's at the lower level, but how are you going to apply it in the different circumstances? So understanding the big picture would be very important. Now, let me just show you how. So I've got a little bit of a big picture here. We're starting off with understanding audit planning. So there's good audit planning and there's poor audit planning. In order for there to be good audit planning, the starting point here is always materiality. So we're going to start off with the benchmark. Who's going to come up with a benchmark? The engagement partner. Who will tell the engagement partner what benchmarks to use? It will be the audit committee who will advise the engagement partner and tell them, look, within this industry, this is the benchmark that the investors are going to be focused on. So the starting point is always the benchmark. And we see that in our question 1, don't we? The second part of good planning is to understand risk assessment procedures. What are risk assessment procedures? How many areas do you have to study when you go into a client? There are 5 areas. So I have got this little acronym called IEFBI, meaning that as an auditor, I have to study the industry, that's a little I, that small caps I. We've got to study the industry. We've got to study the entity, the company, their processes, their suppliers, their customers, strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, their threats. We have to understand the financial performance, the business risk, and the internal controls. We have to understand all of that. So how does this fit in with the AAA exam? Are you going to get a question on what is IEFBI? No, but IEFBI will be within the exhibits for your question 1. So we're looking out for information relating to the industry, peculiarities that may cause the financial statements to be materially misstated. What are the techniques that we use? We're going to use analytical procedures, which also includes audit data analytics. We do a lot of inquiries, and that's why in your exam question, under one of the exhibits for question 1, they always have meetings with the finance director. It could also include inspection. Of course, that is in real life. In the exam, we're not going to inspect anything, but what is it that we inspect? We can inspect documents, reports, we can inspect the factory. One of the reasons why we inspect the factory is to see how busy they are, because if the factory is very, very quiet and the machines are not running, the first thing that comes to my mind is, they're having going concern problems, because your operations are very quiet. And the reason why the operations are quiet is because they don't have any orders. And the reason why they don't have any orders is maybe because they don't have a good product, and because of that, they don't have customers. And the last one is observation. So you can observe the procedures, so you can inspect documents, you can observe the operations. So we've got AEIO. You're not going to get a theory question, but that AEIO will be found within the exhibit. And your examiner seems to place a huge amount of importance on that A, the analytics. Therefore, when it comes to question 1, we make use of the analytics to help us to assess that risk. And after the risk assessment procedures, here is where you are going to determine overall materiality. And after assessing the overall materiality, that's when we are looking at the scenario to see whether we can find significant risk. Significant risk is already high, but high inherent risk factors. And what are high inherent risk factors? Items within the scenario that have got high amount of subjectivity, high level of uncertainty, complexity. There's a high amount of change, susceptibility to management bias, and related party transactions that are outside the ordinary course of business. In order to know what are the purple points, first of all, you need to know what the overall materiality first. The only item where it does not involve materiality is the last R, which is related party transaction, because related party transactions are material by its very nature. Then we're going to look to see whether there's any issues with revenue recognition. And knowing that will help you understand in the exam what are significant audit risks or significant ROMM. If you're not familiar with the SUCS-R items, which are found in ISA 315, SUCS-R is not really an acronym, it's just a bunch of alphabets inside there, but the characteristics of high inherent risk factors. Revenue, ISA 240 says that revenue is an area of significant risk, and therefore the auditor has to presume, even before beginning the audit, that there's fraud or error in the area of revenue recognition. So you have to understand that. So what are we doing now? We're trying to get the big picture. We're thinking about audit planning, which is your question 1. So only if you understand SUCS-R plus the revenue, would you understand what is significant audit risk? Because your question 1 asks you to evaluate and prioritize significant audit risks. So if you don't know what are significant audit risks, you're not going to be able to put them down in your exam. So you need to spend time understanding the characteristics of what are significant audit risks rather than just memorizing past year answers. It is important also that during an audit, once you identify what you think is a significant audit risk, so there has to be that justification as to what is considered to be a significant risk. So what is a significant risk? High inherent risk factor. It could be a high inherent risk factor, or it could be an area of significant internal control deficiency. It is also highly likely to materialize. If it's not highly likely to materialize, it is not an area of significant risk. And the last one is high magnitude of misstatement. So a high magnitude of misstatement is not the overall materiality. We're talking about the level of misstatement that they're going to have. So it's highly likely to materialize. But how do you know it's likely to materialize? You will have to look at the circumstances in the scenario that management are going to purposely make this mistake because it'll help them make more profit. So you have to understand how the picture works in audit planning. We've got the benchmark. We do the risk assessment. We need to make sure that we understand how analytics work. We come up with the overall materiality. We need to understand what are significant risk in ISA 315, the purple points, and what are significant risk in ISA 240, the green point. You add them together, it is an area of significant risk. You need to know the characteristics of the significant risk. So here I put down the word justification. In your question 1, the first 2 points have got to be the area of significant risk, but how are you going to justify them? We justify them using the 3 characteristics. We were talking about the big picture just now, but knowing what is a significant risk is important. And why is it important? Because this one will result in significant auditor attention. What is significant auditor attention? Any kind of auditor attention will be divided into 3 angles. We're going to look at the nature of the work, detailed substantive work. Are we going to do it ourselves? Do we need to bring in an auditor expert? That one is nature. Then we're going to look at the extent, the amount of evidence that you're going to collect. Obviously, something that requires significant auditor attention, you're going to collect a lot of evidence. And then you're going to be careful about the timing of the test. So when you're preparing for the exam, try and link the different points together. How it links in a question 1 and how that moves into question 2 or question 3. Now, if it is an area of significant audit risk or significant ROM, then it could also end up as a key audit matter. How do you know what is a key audit matter? It has to be an item that is communicated to those charged with governance. It has to have significant auditor attention. It has got to be treated correctly in the financial statements, and it has to be significant for the current year. So how your question 1 can end up understanding what is inside your question 2, or even your question 3, if it comes up with a quality kind of a question. The whole audit is connected. What you do at the beginning of the audit, your planning of the audit, the performance of the audit. You can have good performance, bad performance. That's why in our exam questions, you have got something on the quality review. They talk about to evaluate the planning and the performance of the audit. So when you're thinking about the word performance, what is it that you're thinking about? We're thinking about all the audit standards. So if you've got good audit planning and you have got good performance, which is to do with the audit standards, you're more likely to get an appropriate opinion. So on the area of performance here, but that is going to result in an appropriate opinion. On the other side, if you've got poor audit planning and poor performance, then of course it's going to lead to inappropriate opinion. So what is this pink box inside here? These are ISQM 1, ISQM 2 that talks about the quality of the audit. If you don't have good planning, you don't have good performance, you don't have good quality management, chances are you're going to end up giving an inappropriate opinion. And of course, if you give an inappropriate opinion, you're going to have lawsuits, then you're going to have loss of reputation, loss of clients, loss of audit fees, and that's a domino effect. So when you are going through your notes or you're studying a particular topic, try and link it to planning, link it to performance, link it to the opinion. Because if you look at the whole exam, the AAA, it is about audit. Of course, non-audit assignments can come out in your question 3 as well, but the majority of the marks are for the audit. So try and link topics together. The more you can see how it links, the more you're going to be able to remember the value of each one of them and how they tie up, and therefore you're more likely to be able to apply it in the exam. What are we trying to do here? Gain momentum. Our car needs to move fast. So start as early as possible. Get that momentum now itself so that you can slow down a little later. Your car can still go fast. I mean, it's like maybe like riding a bicycle up a hill. Initially, you might have to put in a lot of effort to get a particular speed. But once you get to that speed, then you don't have to work so hard. That's what I'm talking about. All right. I'm not asking you to slow down before the exam, but I'm saying that you'll be able to maintain that speed with lesser effort. Update your learning skills. So let's say in the last exam, you had 47. You cannot use the same learning methods that you used for the last exam as now. There has to be an improvement in the way that you are learning. Don't just rely on raw effort. Think about whether you are helping to improve on your learning ability. Learning is a little bit like a recipe. You have got different elements inside there. You've got the methods involved inside there. You mess up on the elements, you mess up on the method, you are going to end up having a bad outcome. Your cake can fall flat. Your cake can become hard. I've had so many disasters in cooking, but it keeps improving. So I need to remind you that your past failures do not dictate who you are. Just need to change your learning methods. Your learning methods. Now, I want you to listen very carefully. That lack of learning skills can lead to low marks. So I'm not talking about the content of the AAA exam itself, and this applies to any exam. Your learning skills have got to be sharpened. Without learning skills, you're generally going to earn lesser marks anyway. It doesn't matter whether you've got the best tutor, the best notes, the best exam technique, but if you're not improving the quality of your car, the quality of your learning skills, you're going to have trouble climbing that hill on the day of the exam. The reason why we're doing what we're doing here is because we want to work with how the brain works. The brain works a certain way, and we want to take advantage of how the brain works. The brain works the way the brain works. You cannot tell your brain to work differently. You will have to work together with your brain. So the brain will remember things when they can connect information. If you cannot connect the information, the brain will turn around and say, this is not relevant. So the good thing about the AAA exam is that you've already got the big picture when you have completed your AA, your FR, your SBR. So that gives you a very, very good platform. Now we just need to improve the way we learn the information for the AAA exam. Any information that is isolated, maybe you learn just sucks R by itself, you're going to forget it. But if you learn it as part of a big picture, as soon as you see its relevance, it's more likely to stick with you. When you're doing your audit, since we're talking about the AAA exam, everything that we do is all about the planning, the performance, and the reporting. So as you go through the different auditing standards, just think about it, get out an A4 piece of paper. How does this affect planning? How does this affect performance? And how does it affect the opinion? Try that. Just reading, underlining, highlighting your textbook is not going to increase your marks. How do you gain momentum? The fifth point is really very important as well. And that is you need to compare suggested answers. What is it they're looking out for? We're looking out for similarities and we're looking out for differences. So for those students on my program, I create my own suggested answers using the exam techniques which I have taught. So I want to compare suggested answers, look out for similarities and differences, meaning that I'm asking you to go into analyzing suggested answers. Maybe you're using my answer, yeah? And you look at it. The answer for Gruber also has management bias. The answer for Rick Group also has management bias. The answer for Winbury also has management bias. Put the answers next to each other, look at the similarities, look at the differences. So what that means is that you're gaining momentum by not doing the answers individually. Of course, initially you might have to do them individually, but as we go through the exam questions during the course, you can look at the different paragraphs on management bias and how there are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences as well. Stop and think about why the answer to Gruber is slightly different from the answer to Rick Group and why it is slightly different to the answer in Winbury, even though they all are the same point on management bias. So we're analyzing. Analyzing is a higher order of learning. We're not just churning out the answer, just blindly doing past year question, churning out answer after answer after answer, looking at the suggested answer, marking answer. Yes, we need to do that, but you're going one step higher. Remember, we're talking about upgrading your learning skills. Learn how to analyze answers. And then you begin to see, in this question, it was like that. The CEO plans on selling his own shares, 60% of his own shares. But the point down here is that he's not selling it to his sibling, he's selling it to outsiders. If he's selling it to outsiders, he will definitely want more money for it compared to selling it to his sister or brother. So that's a different background. So you can see how management bias works differently. And then you look at Rick Group, it's listed. Now, management bias is not automatic. You have to look at the information within the scenario to see whether there's management bias or not. So the revenue has gone up by 25.6%, and then PBT has only gone up by 2.4%. And I'm like, there are red bells ringing. What are the red bells here? I mean, profit has increased by so much. And I'm thinking to myself, if revenue was not overstated, surely it will be a loss before tax. If you look at the increase of the profit from last year to this year, it's only 1.4 million. That's how they got the 2.4% in the Rick Group question. What is the meaning of 1.4 million? The meaning is that your profit figure is so sensitive to any kind of adjustment. If any kind of adjustment is 1.5 million, that's it. It is not going to be a growth. It is going to be going down from last year. And if you're a listed company, you don't want your results to go down. So I want you to spend time understanding, looking at the scenario, looking at the numbers, studying the numbers. Instead of just doing past year question after past year question after past year question, maybe you should take one day and look at all the analytics for all the questions and understand how the numbers work. So for the RIG group, the PBT was very, very sensitive. The increase is only 1.4 million compared to last year, which means that any kind of adjustment that is more than 1.4 million, it will show the results are going down. And I'm also thinking, what if revenue had increased by only 24% and not 25.6%? What would have happened to the PBT? So now I'm worried about revenue as well. Maybe that growth in revenue is the one that's supporting the PBT. So today we're talking about learning skills, upgrading and updating our learning skills to be able to get more marks in the exam. Let's have a look at Winbury. Winbury is listed. Their revenue increased by 64%, but their PBT increased by 71%. Seriously? How did the PBT manage to increase more than the revenue? Then we find out that some background information. So if you can just spend a day, one study session, looking at the different answers for management buyers, you'll be able to see the similarities and differences, and your learning will be at a higher level. Try that out. Especially if you're resitting the exam, doing the same past year questions again would be very boring because you already know the answers, right? Maybe we should think about it differently. What are we doing today? Improving our learning skills. Moving on to the second blocker. So the first one was about insufficient momentum. You need to get that momentum on the ground so that your juggernaut can climb the hill. If on the ground itself, you don't have that momentum, chances are on the day of the exam, you're going to struggle to reach the red flag. Second blocker, poor understanding of exam techniques. Now, I've got many exam techniques for all the different exam questions. Now, I'm not talking about those exam techniques, that one I'll teach during the lesson. But when I talk about exam technique mastery, the first one is that you need to understand the role of exam techniques. I've got one program called the boot camp where I give them assignments. I design the assignments, meaning that they cannot find the answer anywhere else. Otherwise, students, give them half the chance they were going to find the answer and plonk it into the assignment. I mean, I've been teaching for 30 years. You think I don't know where you got the answer from? Seriously? So I do know. So I have to create the scenarios in such a way that you cannot find the answer anywhere. Okay? And then they do the first assignment. In the boot camp, the first assignment is after week 4. So they've already been on the program for 4 weeks. They've done several types of question 1. And every Sunday, we do a question 1, a 50 marker. So it's not that they've not seen a question 1. And yet, when I give them the first assignment is on question 1. It's a 50 marker. All the assignments are 50 mark assignments. I find that the answers that I receive is like, didn't you understand the exam technique? Students will not pass up bad assignments if they knew it was bad. It's just that that's their output. And I realized that there are blind spots. So you can teach them exam techniques, but when they do it on their own, on a scenario that they've never seen before, they don't understand how the exam technique works. So in the boot camp, I receive the answer for assignment 1. And if they've done it poorly, that means I can see they've not understood the exam technique. I will tell them where they've done wrong and I'll give it back to them and they will redo it. I want to see whether they can improve the understanding because I've been talking to them one-on-one. I'm telling them, this is where you're getting it wrong, correct it, and resubmit. And they're like, okay, I will. Then when I get it back, there are still glimpses of poor understanding of the exam technique. And then I call them up again and say, no, this is not how it works. Do this. And they're like, oh, okay. But when they say, okay, their okay and my okay is different. Because when they write it and give it back to me, I'm like, no, it's not okay. So in assignment 1, sometimes it takes up to 4 resubmissions before I think I can even mark it. So can you imagine? They've been on the program for 4 weeks. They've done several question 1. how is it that when you do your first assignment, you struggle so badly? These are called blind spots. At the fourth stage, at that moment, I think if I gave it for another resubmission, I think they would have killed me. But you know what? I can feel the frustration in their voice. But when they come to assignment 4, their car is steady. The car is moving. They've got momentum. So it is very important that even when you do your question practice, you could be on the boot camp, or maybe you're doing it on your own. That question 1, you need to study your answer, compare it very carefully with the suggested answer, mark it, see what are the areas of your misconceptions and things like that. So exam technique mastery, number 1 is understand the role of exam techniques or the reason for the exam techniques. The first point here is that exam techniques are a form of internal control. It'll help you get reliable answers. It would help you be effective in your work, just like internal controls. I mean, when you look at internal controls in a company, what's the purpose of internal controls? To ensure reliable financial reporting, efficient and effective operations, and compliance with law and regulations, right? So I'm just thinking that if you had good exam techniques, it is a form of internal controls. It will help you get reliable answers. Effective answers means help you to get the marks. When you're thinking about form of internal control for the AAA exam, we're thinking about, okay, the exam technique will tell you how to begin the answer, how to end the answer, what to write in between, so that you don't take up too much time, so that there will be time to complete your question 3. The second one here is that your exam techniques are actually tied to the marking scheme. At least the exam technique that I teach, they're all linked to the marking scheme. So let's say, for example, if you're doing a question on audit risk or ROMM, the exam technique that I use for my students is called OMARI. So what does OMARI stand for? The O here is the observation, that means a story within the scenario. Then we're going to think about materiality. Then we're going to think about the accounting issues. Is it a recognition issue? Is it a measurement issue? Is it a presentation or a disclosure issue? Then we go on to the risk. That management are going to end up doing the wrong thing, because I mean, the risk just doesn't happen on its own. A lot of the time, management is at fault. They're the ones causing the misstatements. Yeah. And the last one is the impact on the financial statement items. So when you look at the ARI, that is 3 items. So your marking scheme says that for every point that you put down under your audit risk, you're going to get 3 marks. Occasionally, when the accounting standard is complex, you might get 4 occasionally, but generally it's always 3. It also makes you time efficient, meaning that you know that every single point you have got to cover that. So you will know how to manage your time in the exam. You know that for ROMM, maybe you need to put down 5 points, and therefore you can manage your time how you write OMARI down. Writing too much is not going to make it time efficient. Writing too little means that you're not going to get the marks. So the exam technique has got this very, very important role. It is a form of internal control. It is tied to the marking scheme and makes you time efficient. The second thing about exam technique is that you need to practice for the different kinds of question. Practice. Like I was telling you about the boot camp, the assignment 1, they have practiced it 4 times before they even submit it for marking. It's very, very intensive. So on the boot camp, I find that the students, by the time that they go for their final mock exam, they're already earning 70+ marks, which means that in the exam, under the stress, they're probably going to fall at 60 something. And my students, they're all working, they all got families and kids, so we don't have any full-time students. So practice that exam technique. So now the question is, how do you practice? So the way that you practice is that you attempt the question to time. You must practice it to time. A lot of students say that they practice exam questions, and indeed they do, but they do not have the clock nearby. They do not watch the time. So they can give a good answer if you're given 9 hours, but your exam, there's only 3 hours, 15 minutes. So with every question, there's a limited time for you. Attempt the question to time. If the time is up, draw a line in your answer and carry on so that you can see your level of output. So the whole answer may be right. You got 6/6, but you took 3 times as much time that was allowed, 3 times as much. So if, let's say, your audit procedure was 6 marks, and if it's 6 marks, then you literally have got sort of 9-10 minutes to complete it, but you took 30 minutes. So you took 30 minutes to get 6 marks. What is your level of output? It's only 2 marks. Because you took 3 times as much, that means your marks must be downgraded or discounted by that. So when students are practicing for the exam, they're like, yeah, I did this, I got 4 marks for this, I got 4 marks for this. Yeah, but how much time did you take? So attempt the question to time. After completing it, you need to mark your answers. And you need to note the mistakes. What kind of mistakes are you making? You need to tally the marks, and then you need to analyze your mistakes next to the suggested answer and find out, did I get this wrong because I misunderstood the exam technique? Did I get this wrong because I forgot the accounting standard? Why did you make that mistake? So you need to note the mistakes, and you need to analyze why you made the mistake. So what we're doing today is talking about updating or upgrading your learning skills to get more marks. So if you're resitting for this exam, if you're just using the same method, chances are in the next exam, your marks are not going to be different. Very unlikely. I had one student who, he's not my student, it's just someone that I know from these casual webinars kind of a thing. He insisted on self-studying. He doesn't want help from the tutor. So I got to know him in 2021, sometime about June. His marks were always bad. And I always tell him, join a course, learn AAA properly. But he says, no, I'll do it on my own. So recently he passed. December exam, he passed. In September, he had 49 marks. In December, he had 50 marks. Boy, was he lucky. But you know what? He's willing to pay the exam fees for 10 times, but he says that the course is too expensive. How is that even possible? We are accountants. We know how to do cost-benefit analysis. So note your mistakes and analyze. But this guy who sat for it 10 times and just passed in December, he says, what's wrong with ACCA? They are so stingy in their marking. But I keep telling him you need to do it the right way. But he wants to do it his way. He's really lucky that he got 50 this time around. He could have very easily got at 49. But he's always of the view that something is wrong with the ACCA markers, that ACCA is against him. But that's not true. I'm in ACCA, I've been teaching for 30 years, and ACCA has always been consistent in the AAA exam. And in any other paper that I've taught as well. I don't have any problems with any of the examiners. They're very consistent. So analyze your mistakes. Analyze why you're making that. Don't just like, this one is wrong. Think about why you made that mistake. Because if you don't analyze the root cause, chances are you're going to repeat it. You are going to re-attempt that question to time after 4 days. Allow some time to go in between and see whether you make the same mistakes. Now, you've already seen the answer. You've marked your answer. You identified your mistake. If the second time you do it, you don't increase your marks, something is wrong with your learning method. How is it that you can do the same question and still get the same marks? So what kind of marks are we aiming for? We're aiming for 80% of the marks. It's only when during the time when your juggernaut is on flat ground, if you can get 80% of the marks, will you be able to get at least 65% of the marks when you're on the hill? But if on the flat ground, you're already getting 60, then when there is a gradient up, I mean, that's just physics, isn't it? What makes you think when you're under stress, you're still going to get 60? You're not building in any kind of space for stress. When you're stressed, you make mistakes. Train your brain to do AAA. So attempt the question again And note the time. If earlier you took 3 hours to do question 1, now that you're reattempting it, do you think you can hit 1 hour, 45 minutes? Do you think you could? Time it. If you don't train the timing on the day of the exam, it's impossible to finish the full paper within that 3 hour, 15 minutes. So that's the second point. We're talking about mastering exam techniques, not just blindly doing them. Next, you need to compare the answers to other answers, meaning you are using Omari. Let's say that's the exam technique that I use for risk or material misstatement in one question. And then you look at the next question and see how Omari is similar or how Omari is different for the same point. So maybe they're both on impairment, but compare the answers to see. So what are you doing? You're trying to analyze the exam technique, not apply it blindly. So blocker number 2 is poor understanding of exam techniques. So in order to overcome that, you need to master exam techniques. Blocker number 3 is weak knowledge. Knowledge can make a significant difference in the quality of your answer, thereby increasing your marks. So it's not just memorizing stuff, but you have to understand that knowledge. So the first point here, how do you improve that knowledge? You need to know the rules in the standards. We're talking about the ISAs, ISQMs, the IFRSs, the ethical code. So you've got your full set of notes. Pay attention to what should be done by the auditor, because when you go to the quality review questions in your question 3, you need to be able to know the rules. This is right, this is wrong. This is a gray area. It depends on the circumstances. Number 2, you need to create mind maps. And these mind maps are more like mind maps with the connections, like what I showed you just now. So it doesn't matter which standard that you're dealing with. Think about how it could impact your planning, how it could impact the performance, and how it could impact the reporting part. Like going concern, you've got the planning part, you have got the performance part, and you have got the reporting part. Create mind maps with connections. Make sure that each mind map is a big picture. So it is not so much that you're doing a mind map just for ISA 315 alone. Look at it as the big picture. ISA 315 talks about significant risks of material misstatement, and that is going to help link it to significant auditor attention, and that is going to help to link it to key audit matters. Create that connection. Don't just underline the notes or highlight the notes. That's very passive learning. It is not going to help you with remembering or applying. Okay, remember at a high-level exam, it's all about remembering and applying. Number 3, keep track of which questions require this knowledge. For example, you're dealing with ISA 510 on initial engagement. That initial engagement points appeared in TEDCO and in Gruber, and it was part of question 1. It was 6 marks. Now, don't turn around and say 6 marks is not material. Every mark is material. In your exam, you don't want to reach 1 mark short of the red flag. That will be just devastating. Keep track of which questions. So you've got your mind map, put a note down there. Or maybe you're talking about audit report, and lots of our questions are on opinions, lots of question 2. There's so many types of question 2 on finalization and reporting. You've got going concern, you've got matters and evidence, you've got matters to communicate with those charged with governance, matters to discuss with management, you've got critical appraisal of the audit report, you've got sufficiency of evidence. But one area which students have got problems is understanding what is, when you come up to the opinion, you need to know what is material and what is pervasive. So if you've got trouble understanding that or trying to understand the logic of it, look at all the different audit report questions that we've done. We would have covered materiality, we would have covered pervasiveness, but each time the reasons would be different. Link it with ISA 705. ISA 705 helps you explain what is material. There are 3 kinds of materiality. You've got material in value, material by impact, and material by its very nature. Try and understand which standards are material by dollar value, by impact, and by nature. Learn what is pervasive. Because if it is something that's difficult and you're always putting it at the back of your mind, it's okay, it's not going to come out, it's only going to be 1 mark or something like that, one day it's going to come back and represent significant amount of marks. If you're struggling, talk to me. If you're on the program, WhatsApp me and say, Sheila, this pervasiveness is driving me nuts. Why is it this one is 0 and it's considered to be material? Or why is it something that can turn a profit into a loss? Why is it only material? Why is it not pervasive? So you need to improve that knowledge, not just memorize things blindly without understanding. So keep a track of which questions. It doesn't matter which question it is, whether it's implications for the auditor's report, or matters to discuss with management, or matters to communicate with those charged with governance. All of them have got this on what is material and what is pervasive. Critical appraisal has also got that. I mean, you're not doing the full question. You're just looking at the different aspects, just to understand materiality, looking at the different questions to see how materiality is argued or how pervasiveness is argued. Improve on your knowledge. Improve your learning skills. Number 4 is, we're talking about the knowledge here, and one very important area is learn how analytics work. Analytics is not only in your question 1. We're talking about analytical procedures. You know, we've got the financial information, we're calculating ratios and things like that. But do you know what happened in December? One group of students in their question 1 only had 1 column of financial information, which means that they were very used to calculating the increase, decrease, but then when they only saw 1 column, they did not know what to do with it. So 1 column simply means that you cannot use trend analysis, but you can use ratios. So learn how analytics works. Look at every single question, study, spend a day, maybe one of your study sessions, studying the financial information in different exam questions. Analytics does not only apply in question 1, analytics also applies in your question 2. Because if you look at analytical procedures, they are applied at the planning stage. It is applied as part of substantive procedures, and they're also part of overall analytical procedures. So instead of just doing exam question after exam question after exam question, upgrade your skill of analyzing the answers, analyzing the questions. Use that as a separate study time. The final blocker is slow speed. So now we need to think about speed enhancement strategies. How do we do that? First thing I noticed is that some students have got very slow typing speed. So measure your typing speed. Right, many students who, you know, in my program saying, when I ask them, what's your typing speed? They say, I'm okay. And then when they do the typing test, they find, oh my goodness, I can only type 10 words per minute. So you might have the most brilliant mind, but if your typing speed is 10 words per minute, how many words only can you put down in 3 hours, 15 minutes? Your minimum speed must be 35 words per minute. So here you are spending so much time studying and practicing exam questions, only to find out that your car can only move at 10 words per minute. You're not going to reach the red flag on time. There's still time to practice every day. Maybe you need to practice 30 minutes in the morning and maybe 15 minutes in the afternoon during your lunch break, and maybe 30 minutes at night, just to get your car ready for speed. Because here you are practicing your exam questions to get the answers down as fast as possible. But the only problem is that your typing speed is so slow. Work on your typing speed. Otherwise, every other speed is just going to be wasted. Typing speed, really important. Minimum 35 words per minute. Number 2 is that you need to practice your questions to time. Set the time. You know, when we have the progress test or the mock exams, I sort of invigilate them. There's a Zoom call and the cameras are on and I can see them working very hard. But you know what? When the time is up, they don't want to stop typing. I have to keep saying, time's up, stop. And you need to email your answer to me within the next 2 minutes. Otherwise, I'm not marking it. So from my email, it puts down the time, right? And I can see how much extra time you've taken. That tells me that the students don't know how to stop, which means on the day of the exam, they're going to run out of time. Maybe you watch some TV cooking shows and they've got a certain amount of time and the time is up, they put up their hands. Yeah, maybe you need to learn how to do that too. Time's up. Practice the questions to time. Another thing that you can do to improve your speed is on the boot camp, because they submit their assignments, I can see how long-winded they are. Something that can only take 10 words, sometimes they're taking 30 words. So what I want you to do is look at your answer, review your paragraphs, see whether you can reduce the number of words. In school, we had essay writing. They gave us a really long essay, and then we had to try and find words to limit it. Do the same thing, because lesser words means lesser typing. You can get more answers in. I'm not asking you to reduce the quality of your answer. I'm just asking you to look at the number of words. So there's some students I find that where they are very much into writing and expressing, and it's as if they're telling a story. In our exam, time is limited. You have to get your 1 mark with the least number of words possible. Audit your number of words. Use a red pen. Not necessary, not necessary. One of the areas where the students waste a lot of time is say, according to IFRS 15. Don't go into according to. Straight away, just put down recognition criteria. Revenue should not be recognized until performance obligation is completed. Full stop. End of story. No need to go on and on and on. So audit your words. Bring it down to the bare essence that is necessary to earn that 1 mark. Number 4, with question 1, I use a particular exam technique with my students to improve the speed of answering. And I call that EFAST. So we've got EFAST. So in order to improve the speed, it's actually EFAST, but EFAS must be completed within 30 minutes max, not more than that. Now is the time to practice to get EFAS within 30 minutes. What is EFAS? We're going to read the email, talk about question 1. Read the email. That's where the requirements are. But you're going to read the front page of the question first, and you're going to go onto the email and create your framework, all your major headings, your briefing notes, your introduction. Then maybe you've got significant business risk, significant risk of material misstatement, principal audit procedures, ethical issues, all your main heading. Then fill in the framework. So under the briefing notes, you copy paste and you swap the to and the from. Then you go to the introduction. Know that your introduction must have 2 mini paragraphs or 2 mini ideas. These briefing notes are prepared, blah, blah, blah. And these briefing notes include, fill that all in. Then go on to your risk of material misstatement. First thing you're going to do is look at the marks, calculate how many points you need. Then you are going to copy paste that Omari, because it's saving so much time. Let me explain how that works. So what I do with my answers is that for question 1, the risk of material misstatement, I know I will have to put a line on materiality. So I will type out the PPE of how many million is highly material. How many times materiality? I don't know. 10 times overall materiality. That is how material it is. Because I'm going to use that sentence every time anyway. Then I'm going to put down the accounting standard. But because you've got professional skills mark, I will have to say, in this case, I have to apply it. So meaning that maybe the point is on revenue. So I will say that the recognition criteria for revenue is that revenue should only be recognized when performance obligation is completed. In this case, you can only recognize the revenue when the goods have been delivered or something like that. In this case, apply it to the scenario. If you use the words in this case, it will not only help you get the technical marks, but it will also help you get the professional skills mark, because you're applying IFRS 15 to the scenario. Then I have got risk that management may end up doing the wrong thing. And then impact is consequently, something is going to be overstated, understated. There's one more line here. So I'm going to say, this is a significant risk because. So supposing in your ROMM, you need 5 points. On the CBE platform, I will control V. Then I'm going to control V. but the examiner only expects you to have significant risk twice, right? So I'm going to put the third point down here, Control V, and then I'm going to take this off, and then I'm going to take that on the CB platform, Control C. So I've already got 3 points here, right? I need 5. Then I'm going to Control V, and then I'm going to Control V. This way, I save so much time. And not only that, the exam technique is going to make sure that you cover all the elements of ARI. That's where the marks are. In this case, the A, the R, the impact on the financial statement items. And because I've got this down, I will not forget to put down the justification. You're only required to put justification for the first 2 points. So in my answers, there's no conclusion. The examiner says you can also put down the justification for significant risk under conclusion, but I'm not using that method. So I'd rather do it here and now. So you can do lots of copy pasting to save time. That is filling in the framework. Then after that, I do the analytics. Then after that, I'm going to go through the scenario. I'm going to do all the copy pasting. And all of this must be completed within 30 minutes. Train now. If you don't train to do it within 30 minutes, chances are on the exam day, you're going to take 2 hours. Point number 5, keep practicing and note. This one is slightly different from this. This one is practice the time. Here, your focus is note the improvement in your time. That means previously, you took 60 minutes to do EFAS. Now you're taking 45 minutes to do EFAS. Next time, you're doing 27 minutes to do your EFAS. Keep a notebook on the improvement. What are the 4 blockers? The first one is insufficient momentum. The second blocker is poor understanding of exam techniques. The next one is weak knowledge. And the other one is slow speed. So if you can work on these 4 areas, you're well on your way to passing. You will be able to reach the red flag and even go beyond it. Okay, but it requires practice. So before we end, let me just introduce you to the 3 programs that we have. We've got the boot camp, the tutor-led self-study, and the crash course. The boot camp and the self-study program, they are both full courses. The crash course is more of a refresher for those who are resitting. Now, if you're doing it for the first time, I would suggest the boot camp, or if you have failed the exam multiple times and you're not really sure what's wrong with how you're writing the answer, go for the boot camp. The self-study program is a full course, but it's more suitable for those people who like to work on their own and are very disciplined. The crash course essentially is just a refresher to refresh you with all the knowledge that you require. It's not a full course, but we'll also go through the exam techniques so that you'll be ready for the exam. So hoping to hear from you soon.